The first sign of trouble came in early October when a bright red notice appeared in my mailbox. The HOA, led by none other than Karen, had issued a new rule: no Halloween decorations this year. I read the letter in disbelief. No pumpkins, no spiderwebs, no skeletons, nothing that could be considered festive or scary. The reason? To maintain the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity and ensure community safety. It was classic Karen. She was known for making ridiculous, controlling rules, but banning Halloween decorations was a new low. The worst part? She had already begun patrolling the streets, personally removing any decorations she found on people's lawns. I looked over at my neighbors, some of whom were already grumbling about the decision. Halloween had always been a big deal here. Families decorated their houses, kids dressed up, and the whole street came alive with spooky fun. But not this year. Or so Karen thought. Word spread fast. Within hours, neighbors were venting in group chats and huddling outside, frustrated over Karen's latest power trip. This is ridiculous. Halloween is for the kids. She can't just ban an entire holiday's traditions. What's next? No Christmas lights? No birthday balloons? The frustration was universal, but the problem? No one wanted to challenge Karen. She thrived on power and intimidation. People had seen what happened when others defied her rules: fines, threats, and even legal action. Some residents tried to reason with her. A small group approached her during her daily HOA patrol and asked if she'd reconsider. Karen, arms crossed and smirking, shut them down immediately. The rule stands. If I see one plastic skeleton, one witch hat, or even a single carved pumpkin, there will be consequences. The mood turned hopeless. Some neighbors gave up, afraid of the inevitable fines. But as I stood there, watching Karen strut away with her clipboard of doom, an idea started forming in my mind. Karen wanted to ban Halloween decorations? Fine. I wouldn't put up decorations. I'd turn my entire house into a full-scale haunted attraction, completely legal, proof, and utterly unstoppable. If Karen wanted to play the rules game, I'd beat her at it. I spent the next 2 days poring over the HOA guidelines, looking for any loophole that could work in my favor. And that's when I found it. Nowhere did it explicitly ban themed events or home attractions as long as they weren't decorations left unattended. That meant I couldn't leave pumpkins, skeletons, or cobwebs sitting out on my lawn. But I could host an interactive haunted house event for the neighborhood. If I made everything part of a performance with live actors and moving elements, then legally I wouldn't be decorating. I'd be entertaining. The plan? Heavy checkmark, transform my entire property into a haunted house. Heavy checkmark, invite the entire neighborhood, including kids Karen had upset. Heavy checkmark, make everything movable or part of a live event to stay within HOA rules. Heavy checkmark, turn it into a charity fundraiser, making it even harder for Karen to fight. I knew this would drive her insane, but she wouldn't have a single legal leg to stand on. And so, the construction of the ultimate HOA-proof haunted attraction began. I knew Karen would patrol the neighborhood like a hawk, looking for any excuse to shut me down before I even started. So I had to be stealthy. For the next few days, I worked only at night, setting up the haunted attraction in pieces inside my garage. Props? Ordered in plain boxes so Karen wouldn't suspect a thing. Fog machines, animatronics, and speakers? Hidden until the last moment. Actors? Recruited from my friends, neighbors, and even a few local teens who wanted revenge on Karen. I told my closest neighbors about the plan, and they were all in on it. They helped by keeping watch and making sure Karen didn't snoop around. By the time Halloween week rolled in, my haunted house was ready to be unveiled, and Karen had no clue what was coming. Finally, Halloween night arrived. As the sun set, I put the finishing touches on my haunted house. The fog machines hissed to life, eerie red lights flickered, and spine-chilling sound effects echoed down the street. The second I flipped the switch to activate everything, people started flocking to my house. Kids cheered and ran toward the entrance. Parents laughed and pulled out their phones to record. My volunteers, dressed as ghosts, zombies, and witches, took their places. Then, right on cue, Karen appeared. She stormed over, her face twisted in rage, arms flailing as she screeched, "This is a violation of HOA rules." But here's the kicker, it wasn't. I had triple-checked the HOA guidelines. Nowhere did it say I couldn't decorate my private property for a single night. Still, Karen wasn't about to give up. She threatened to call the police, waving her phone around dramatically. But what she didn't know was, as Karen furiously jabbed at her phone, probably calling the HOA board or the police, I calmly walked over and pulled out a printed copy of the HOA regulations. I had highlighted every relevant rule. I pointed out a key loophole. Nowhere in the HOA guidelines did it say homeowners couldn't have temporary decorations for a single event. Even better, the rules explicitly allowed holiday displays as long as they didn't stay up for more than 24 hours. Karen's face twisted as she read the document. She knew she had nothing. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "This is a public disturbance," she shrieked. "You're attracting strangers to our neighborhood. I'll have you fined for this." I smirked. "Karen, the HOA president already gave me verbal approval this morning." That's when she realized she had lost. But instead of admitting defeat, she did something even more ridiculous. Fuming, Karen stomped away while muttering under her breath. Moments later, I saw her furiously dialing on her phone. Within 15 minutes, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, looking mildly amused. Karen rushed over to them, dramatically pointing at my house. "This man is disturbing the peace. He's running an illegal haunted house and attracting dangerous strangers to our neighborhood." The officers turned to me. "Sir, we got a call about a public disturbance. Can you explain what's going on?" I calmly replied, "This is a private Halloween event for my neighbors and friends. I had already cleared it with the HOA president. There was no noise ordinance violation. The music and sound effects were all within permitted limits. Plus, it was on my property, and no laws were being broken." Then came the kicker. One of my guests happened to be an off-duty firefighter who immediately vouched for me. Even better, one of the officers had brought his own kids last year when I did a smaller version of the attraction. Karen's face turned beet red as she realized she had just wasted the cops' time. One officer turned to her and said, "Ma'am, this is not a crime. If you keep calling us over things like this, you could be charged with filing a false report." Karen's jaw dropped. She tried to argue, but the officers were already walking away. And then, things got even worse for her. As the police left, Karen stood frozen, her face contorted with frustration. The crowd had grown, and many of my neighbors were openly laughing, some even recording the whole debacle. She wasn't used to losing. "I'll have you all fined for this," she screeched, pointing at random people like a deranged witch casting curses. "You think this is funny? This is a residential community, not a carnival." A group of kids ran past her, giggling as they entered my haunted attraction. Karen tried to step in their way, but one of the parents, an ex-military dad who had butted heads with her before, stood in front of her with his arms crossed. "I think you've done enough, Karen," he said calmly. That's when she lost it completely. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Karen stormed into my yard, grabbed one of my animatronic zombies, and tried to yank it out of the ground. The problem? It was staked down. She yanked. It didn't budge. She yanked again, harder. Crack. The stake snapped, and Karen stumbled backward. In the process, she tripped over a fog machine and landed flat on her back in the middle of my yard, arms flailing like an overturned turtle. Silence. Then laughter. People burst out laughing. Kids. Parents. Even my volunteers dressed as ghosts and vampires. Karen scrambled to her feet, her face now as red as a jack-o'-lantern. She looked around at the sea of amused faces and did the only thing she could do. She ran. But her nightmare wasn't over yet. The very next morning, word had spread like wildfire. The videos of Karen's meltdown were already circulating in the neighborhood group chat, and a few had even made their way to social media. Someone had added dramatic music to the clip of her tripping over the fog machine. It was comedy gold. But the best part? The HOA board had seen everything. By noon, the HOA president, an older gentleman named Mr. Reynolds, called an emergency meeting. Karen, still fuming from the night before, arrived with her usual smug confidence, but this time the board wasn't on her side. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat and began. "Karen, we've received multiple complaints about your behavior last night. We review the HOA guidelines, and there was no violation. However, your actions, harassing homeowners, calling the police unnecessarily, and causing a scene were unacceptable." Karen scoffed. Unacceptable. I was trying to uphold the integrity of this community. This circus was a disgrace. A woman on the board, Mrs. Patel, raised an eyebrow. Funny, I heard it was the most successful neighborhood event we've had in years. Families loved it. Even the local news covered it. Karen's face twitched. The news? I smirked. Yep. A local reporter showed up after seeing all the buzz online. They even interviewed some of the kids about how much fun they had. It was a great segment. You should check it out. Karen's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might shatter. Then Mr. Reynolds dropped the bombshell. We've discussed it, and we feel your behavior has become a problem. As of today, you are being removed as head of the HOA. The room fell silent. Karen blinked. You can't do that. We can and we are. Effective immediately, you are no longer in charge of enforcing rules, and frankly, we think it's best if you take a step back from HOA matters entirely. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She turned to the other board members, but none of them would meet her gaze. She had finally alienated everyone. For the first time ever, Karen was powerless. And just like that, the reign of terror was over. With Karen officially dethroned, the mood in the neighborhood shifted overnight. People were celebrating like we had just won a war. The best part? My haunted house had been such a massive success that neighbors immediately started asking if I'd do it again next year. Even Mr. Reynolds, the now much more reasonable HOA president, approached me with an idea. What if we made this an official neighborhood event? He suggested. We could block off part of the street, get more people involved, maybe even set up food stalls. Turn it into something the whole community can enjoy. I grinned. You're serious? He nodded. Absolutely. The turnout was incredible, and it brought the neighborhood together. This is the kind of thing we should be encouraging. And just like that, my petty rebellion against Karen turned into a full-fledged annual tradition. The next year, the haunted house was even bigger. More neighbors pitched in, some built their own mini haunted setups in their yards, others volunteered as actors, and a local bakery even donated spooky treats. And Karen, well, let's just say she no longer had the power to stop it. She still lived in the neighborhood, of course, but after the HOA debacle, she kept to herself. She spent most of the event glaring from behind her curtains like a grumpy Halloween Scrooge. But the best part? Every year, without fail, kids would walk by her house and whisper, "That's where the Halloween witch lives." I couldn't have planned it better myself. Even though Karen had lost her HOA power, she still tried to act like she was in charge. For weeks, she sulked and gave dirty looks to anyone who even mentioned Halloween. Of course, she had become somewhat of a neighborhood legend by this point. Kids told exaggerated stories about her, making her sound like an actual Halloween villain. She cursed the whole street. One kid whispered, "My dad says she tried to ride her broomstick away, but crashed into a mailbox." Another joked. Even local teenagers turned her into a meme. Someone had printed out a blown-up image of her tripping over the fog machine and put it up as decoration for next year's haunted house. Needless to say, Karen wasn't happy about her new reputation. To make things even funnier, the local news ran a follow-up segment about our new Halloween tradition. They even played a blurred-out version of the viral clip of Karen falling. The reporter chuckled as he narrated, "It seems that not even the scariest haunted house could match the terror of the HOA trying to ban Halloween." But in the end, the neighborhood won, turning a would-be ban into a brand-new tradition. I couldn't have asked for better PR. And Karen, she apparently called the news station and demanded they remove the footage. They didn't. A few months later, Karen made one last pathetic attempt at a comeback. She started campaigning to get back on the HOA board, claiming that the chaos from the haunted house had ruined the neighborhood's peaceful atmosphere. She even went door-to-door with a clipboard, asking people to sign a petition. Out of curiosity, I asked my neighbor if anyone actually signed it. "Yeah," he said with a smirk. Karen signed it. Twice. That was the end of that. One of the biggest victories. The HOA itself changed. Without Karen enforcing ridiculous rules, things started running a lot smoother. People weren't getting fined for tiny things like garden gnomes or Christmas lights. In fact, the new HOA board actually encouraged holiday celebrations. They even set up a small budget for community events, making our annual haunted house officially sanctioned. Karen had wanted to erase Halloween, but in the end, she made it bigger than ever. The following year, the haunted attraction returned, bigger and better. More volunteers, More decorations. More revenge. We even added a new feature, a Karen's haunted courtroom section, where a volunteer dressed like her, clipboard and all, would pop out and scream, "You're violating HOA rules." It was the biggest laugh of the night. As I stood there, watching the happy families enjoying the event, I realized that what started as a petty feud had turned into something truly special. Halloween was back, and this time it was here to stay. And as for Karen, well, every year I make sure to put a special sign right outside my haunted house, dedicated to the one who tried to stop it, and I know she sees it.